Absolutely delighted now to be joined by Kristine Harper, who's a science historian. First of all, Kristine, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. So tell me a little bit about, you're a science historian, tell me a little bit about what you look for in your research as a science historian.
Well, as a science historian, I'm trying to put the science that people do into a historical context. And so we need data to do that. We can't just make it up, right? So we look for people's correspondence, with letters that they wrote to each other, records of telephone calls, their notebooks, if we can find their notebooks, diaries that they might have kept, and then their formal writings and sometimes oral history interviews. And then we put that all together with what was going on in the world at the time, so that we can figure out what influenced them and why they took the path that they took.
It's really important, isn't it, to put things into context these days?
You need it to be in context, otherwise it doesn't mean anything to anybody, right? I mean, if you're a scientist, it's interesting to you just because you're curious about it and you want to find out what's going on. But if you're trying to explain that to other people, you have to put it in a way that it makes sense to them and it's important to them.
Now, 2019, very exciting, the AGU celebrating its centennial.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about what you have planned for that.
Well, on the history side of this, the storytelling side of this, the big events will be around what we call our narratives program, right? And so what we're trying to do is show people what the value is of the earth science that we do, not just the general public, but funders and policymakers and the media, people who can get the word out about us. So we're trying to make this a grassroots effort, involve as many AGU members as we can to get the word out about what we do.
So with the AGU narratives, how do you go about telling those stories in such an engaging way?
Well, you know, everybody here has a story about the kind of science that they do, and they've already told those stories to their wives, their husbands, their parents, their kids, their neighbors. I mean, if somebody says to them, "What do you do? What's exciting about what you do?" they're able to do that, right? Because they're going to tell a story about what they do without getting down into the weeds. And so through our narratives program, which will include people having dialogues with StoryCorps, with us doing some oral history interviews, with all AGU members being able to put in their own story in through the website. In those ways, we'll be able to gather those stories that get out the value of what we do.
I think that's so important these days, isn't it? And how, my final question would be, how are you going to measure the impact of that series?
Well, I think what we'll find as we do these grassroots programs, locally, regionally, nationally, we'll be getting more queries from people who are really interested in what we do, and they're going to want to help. And so the more we can reach out and get our story out to people in a way that they understand, so they see the value of what we do as earth scientists for the earth in general and for all the inhabitants that there are here, then we'll be seeing this kind of groundswell of support, I think, for the earth sciences. And people will reach out to us asking questions and looking for us to help provide solutions.
Kristine, thank you ever so much indeed for joining us today. It all sounds very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.